Cool. I'm just trying to get back in.
We're live now.
All right. Thanks, Aya.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we'll make a start because some people will join as they go along, but also this is being recorded so people can watch it afterwards. And we've all got evenings that we need to get through this today. My name is David Meiklejohn. I am coming to you today from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation here in Melbourne, and I pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I actually, when we're talking about running networks and collaborating, I actually run two networks. One is the Northern Alliance for Greenhouse Action, which is a network of 9 councils here in metropolitan Melbourne. And the other is a network of councils across Australia which have declared a climate emergency. More than 100 have declared a climate emergency now. And we work together and collaborate regularly through advocacy, capacity building, trying to share best practice and information. And that's really the sort of focus of what we're looking to do this evening, is to try and bring you some examples of really good examples of collaboration across a whole range of areas. Local governments can do a lot of things by themselves, but we can also do a lot more together. And by collaborating, we become more than some of our parts. And the different types of collaboration really include things like working with other local governments, and we'll be hearing a little bit about that, especially from our first speaker. And then we're working with other tiers of government and also working especially with our community. So all of our speakers this evening exemplify the importance of collaboration and how it actually works in practice. So without any further ado from me, I'm going to go to our first speaker this evening. Hugh Butcher is Darebin's Senior Environment Officer for Energy and has been in that position for more than 4 years, but has a much longer history. And Hugh and I actually work together in the same network, and Hugh is definitely one of the people I would rely on for expertise in this area. He has done a lot of work on strategy development, advising state authorities on renewable energy procurement and large-scale water storage projects. He's worked at a number of councils in and around inner Melbourne, including the City of Yarra, working on their greenhouse program and helping them achieve carbon neutral certification. He also, before Darebin, worked at the City of Melbourne on their groundbreaking MREP, Melbourne Renewable Energy Project, which was a large-scale power purchase agreement and is a forerunner to the project, which you went out and made even bigger and better in the Victorian Energy Collaboration, or VECO. And that's what he's going to be talking about this evening. So Hugh, I'm going to pass over to you now.
Thanks, David. I'm just going to start sharing my screen. Hopefully everything works. If everyone can give us a thumbs up if you can see everything. Yep, great, away we go. Okay, so thanks, David, for that introduction. So as, oh, hang on a second. I think I just lost it, pardon me. Just give us a moment, sorry people. Not sure what happened there. Hopefully you can see that again. No, all good. All right, so we'll get started. So as David said, I'm from Darebin City Council and I'll be presenting on the Victorian Energy Collaboration. Those who are with us tonight know Darebin fairly well, but for those who might be watching this later, Darebin is a inner city council here in Melbourne, Victoria. And we span everything from sort of the inner city of Northcote right up to Reservoir in the north. We've got a pretty diverse community as well, with a third of us born overseas, and similarly we have about the same percentage having English, a language other than English spoken at home, so quite diverse. In terms of the context for VECO, before we actually step through it, it really aligns strongly with where Darebin has placed itself over the past 5 or 6 years or so. For those who are not familiar, Darebin was the first local government in the world to declare a climate emergency, and after that we subsequently developed the first climate emergency plan. And In terms of a collaboration project that sort of works on renewable energy, we really sort of were anticipating something like Vico. And as you can see with some of these sort of statements that we've got in our climate emergency plan, it really steps out, I suppose, the strategic alignment for this particular project on working together for a common goal, and to really sort of support the concept of renewable energy, and particularly looking at how we can focus on council operations to get 100% renewable energy supplies. And certainly the networks that we've had existing through things like the Greenhouse Alliances, and for Darebin, that is NAGA for us, or Northern Alliance for Greenhouse Action, we really utilise those existing sort of relationships to our advantage. But when the project started, I wanted to sort of go back a little bit and see why this particular project was appetising for councils in the beginning. So go back to 2017, where this idea really sort of started. One of the things that was introduced within Victoria was the rate capping, which sort of limited the amount of increase in annual rates could go up or down. The other thing as well is that most councils' contracts have just come off electricity contracts that were quite cheap, and they essentially doubled from one year to the next. And so that was a massive hit and a big eye-opener for many councils. The other thing as well is we had a lot of external reliance on others developing these contracts for us. And even though we had some sort of economies of scale, the concept of renewable energy itself was quite challenging because it was quite expensive at the time. And even if you were purchasing renewable energy as a council, you didn't have any connection of where it was coming from, and you were purchasing something that you had was quite a disconnect between the two things. So out of this particular sort of issues that councils were sort of grappling with, Vico was born. And when we looked to establish Vico, we had a very simple, clear outcome in mind, and we just wanted access for every single Victorian council to have access to 100% renewable energy. That's essentially what Vico is all about. And so in terms of how the project works, we've bundled our 46 councils are part of Vico, and we've bundled our energy supplies that we need for our council operations, such as town halls, street lights, community centres and the like, and we've bundled them up together in aggregate and asked for that to be under a new retail contract that connects us with renewable energy facilities. And that's what we've got. So councils have got their own individual contract. Now, cumulatively, those 46 councils account for over half of all the load and demand that councils have here in Victoria annually. And as you can see, it equates to quite a large amount of sort of emission savings. And it's so big, in fact, that this is actually the largest emissions reduction project by local governments in Australia ever. So this is the biggest project. So pretty impressive numbers there. In terms of the actual projects that we're linked to, our deal connects us to two wind farms here in Western Victoria. We've got Dundonnell Wind Farm, which is currently operational, supplying us renewable energy from since July 1. And we've also got Murray-Warra Part 2, which is currently being constructed as we speak and should be online in about 12 months' time. So these are two of Victoria's largest wind farms and two of the largest wind turbine technologies as well. These are quite large turbines themselves. So together, obviously, the output that they have is much bigger than what we need, but it's definitely linked to our sort of contract needs. Beyond the actual nuts and bolts, though, we've got some pretty pleasing features. So one of them is that when we actually signed up to this particular deal, we did some financial modelling and found that this offer is cheaper than our old arrangements. The other thing as well is that we're connected to projects that we can see and are associated with, and these have got really high quality social outcomes and got a really strong social licence to operate. And we've also been able to negotiate from an administration day-to-day side of things. We've got KPIs with our retailers that they have to deliver on, and new levels of customer support that we've never really had previously. So we're really pleased with that. But I suppose the bigger question around collaboration for projects like this is what do we think made this project work? That's all the sort of, all the features of it, but how did it work? And we've really sort of had a thought about how we can dissect it. And we've kind of come up with sort of 5 or 6 things that have worked really well for us. So the first one of those things is around trust. And we think that part of this project really requires trust in the lead, in the lead organisation, or whoever's taking the lead. And for us, that was Darebin in this particular instance. And we really looked at what sort of elements around we needed to instill trust in the other buyers group members to ensure that we could get the outcome that we want and help sort of push this project forward and lead on their behalf. And things like really good governance from the outset is really essential, and we worked really hard on making sure we got that right. The other thing as well is energy markets and deals like this are really technical, and being able to actually understand the subject matter that you're in and not just 100% rely on your external advisors is really important, I think, because you need to be able to articulate really technical and really complex things quite simply to the broader buyers group. And the concept of actually having sound project management on top of that, and also that sense of leadership, making sure that this is going to be supported throughout the whole entire organisation. And we were very fortunate to have that particular element well locked away. Another point that we're really sort of hit on is thinking about the capacity of the buyers group itself and building that over time, and anticipating that by the time that you get to the end of this process, that your buyers group members and your individuals within these organisations actually have the skills, the experience, and the knowledge and know-how to actually make a decision when it comes to crunch time. So we had this very at the forefront of our thinking, and making sure that everyone along the way understands the topic and has enough information that they can actually make an informed decision. And it wasn't just targeting your sustainability and environment individuals, it's looking at all different particular decision makers across the particular project. And we had over 500 people involved in decision making because we had such a large buyers group. So it was really important for us to be able to hit so many different people and give them enable them to be informed decision makers. Another element for us, but back to us as the lead organisation, and indeed some of the sort of broader sort of decision-making group, was to be open to change. And this was something that was something that we needed to learn a little bit over time. And while we were actively seeking feedback along the way, we realised that we didn't, sometimes to be working in such a big group, being overly prescriptive didn't necessarily work. So we went on the outset with saying that we could make sure that we would keep the buyers group interest in mind, but that might actually change because the buyers group composition may change over time and there might be differing of opinions. So that was something that we needed to be very flexible about. The other thing as well is around assuming things won't go to plan. So even when, there's so many different elements to that. There's everything from the fact that there is 46 different individuals with potentially 46 different perspectives, but things that you're planning may not actually come to fruition. So being able to be flexible, anticipate some of those things, and being able to be agile and move in different directions if need be. And sort of what I was alluding to before, taking a group perspective as well was really important. We very much took that 80-20 rule around making sure that it met the needs of the broader buying group. And we definitely took this question on board and pushed this back to the buyers group around making decisions, is around the concept of, can you live with the decision that we're making, and things like that. So that was a very simple way of us as a group to effectively go through this journey and be able to progress without getting sort of, stuck in a stage of paralysis, because us as a group had diverging needs, and we really came back to saying we think that this is the buyers group perspective. Does that actually meet the buyers group need, or was it an individual need? And if so, could you actually live with it? The other thing around is making sure that we left no one behind in this particular process, and we felt that the group was stronger as a collective rather than having people or councils falling off along the way. So we did a lot of work making sure that we were helping people along the key stages, and we had everything from the smallest council to the largest council in Victoria in this particular project. So we had a diverging amount of needs around knowledge, but also support and things like that. So we sort of made sure that we met everyone and made sure that they got what they needed. And then the last one is, this is a sort of a bit of a spruik for Greenhouse Alliances and David's role. But one of the things that we were really sort of successful with is leveraging those existing networks that we had, and certainly the Greenhouse Alliances were integral to this. But also when we're looking for external advisors, making sure that they were willing to collaborate with us and not be a transactional type of arrangement. They really needed to share a desire to get to the goal and the outcome that we were wanting to achieve as well. And I think that we actually, along the way, did actually change advisors a couple of times in certain areas to make sure we got the right fit, because it wasn't working out. And I think that was really important, that people understood and were connected with our advisors, and they trusted them just as much as they did anyone else. So that's pretty much so together we think that enabled us, I suppose, here at Darebin to deliver what we did, and we've been sort of overwhelmed with the success of this and really humbled by the take up. And we're now at the point where we're actually thinking about accepting new councils into VECO that haven't been purchasing renewable energy yet, and seeing how we can sort of expand that buyers group to be bigger and better. So with that, that's me, David. So thank you.
That's good. Thanks very much, Hugh. We're going to keep questions till the end, unless anyone's got a particular point of clarification from Hugh. But otherwise, we'll keep questions to the end, because then we're going to use the 4 presentations to make more of a conversation around collaboration and what we've learned and what were the overlaps and so on. I'm going to keep going with the renewable energy theme now, and we're going to Taryn, Taryn is from Central Victoria, for those of you who are outside Victoria, and she's a part-time manager of Australia's first community-owned cooperative wind farm, Hepburn Wind. It has been working there for over a decade now. The wind farm is really a pioneer in the community energy movement in Australia, and it's been recognised nationally and globally as such. And it's not just a wind farm, it's looking at a range of partnership programs through a collaborative banner of Hepburn ZNet, with solar and battery bulk buyers, energy audit, PV bulk buyers, and so on. So it's continually evolving over time. So Taryn is also in regional Victoria, so has the joys of regional Australia's internet, and in particular, given that we are facing a big weather pattern tonight here in Victoria. So I'm going to run your presentation for you. So I'll get that up and running for you, Taryn. Just give me a second.
Lovely. Thank you so much.
Talk and introduce yourself while I do that.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for having me online. I guess my perspective will be coming from the community perspective of collaboration with council, business sector, local sustainability groups in a very place-based way in our small local shire. As you can see from the map there, we're smack bang in the centre of Victoria, and we're a shire that's renowned for its tourism, its mineral springs, its nature. The Wombat Forest is sort of layered all over our shire, and as I said, a small shire, so only 15,000 people, but very, very active in sustainability, also, including permaculture. It's a real hub of permaculture, and it is the place of Hepburn Wind. Next slide, please. So our community wind farm, as David mentioned, was the first community energy project in Australia. And we were built over a decade ago now, heading into our 11th year. We're a cooperative, but we're also a certified B Corp and a certified social enterprise under the Australian certification system. We have 2009 members. The majority of those are local to the area, and we have 2 turbines, so 4.1 megawatts of wind combined capacity, and we're very proudly an all-woman run wind farm, so an all-woman executive. And we have 2 turbines, so enough for 2,100 homes. So we were the first and still are the only example of a local net zero energy project in Australia. Next slide. We're currently in final application to for a planning permit to add a solar and battery storage facility up at the wind farm site, and they fit really neatly with the wind generation because the wind drops down in the middle of the day. So combining it with a solar farm works really well in regards to heading towards operating like a 24-hour power plant, and obviously coupling a battery storage on top of that helps those ambitions even further. So that will power another 1,800 homes. So it's about 15 to 17% of our shire, and we're working on a netted off retail offer so locals can more directly purchase the generation from the wind farm. So that'll be more solar up there than we've got wind. It'll be 7.4 megawatts of solar. Next slide. So we have been working in collaboration with our local council, with local sustainability groups, businesses, sector representatives like farmers since 2018 around the idea of, I guess, taking the ambitions of what Hepburn Wind was able to achieve in energy in a very local level with our town of Daylesford and Hepburn Springs, and expanding it across the shire and working out, how are we going to reach goals of zero net energy by 2025 and zero net emissions by 2030 for the whole shire. So we worked with the community to co-develop a plan, a master plan to get there, to do all the carbon emissions inventory, to find out what sort of projects were interesting and desirable for the local community, and put together this master plan, which was then endorsed by council in 2019 as the community's plan for the next 10 years. And we ensured things like a social justice lens for all of our activities. We operate, everything we do is under Creative Commons, so it's all completely shareable. And really it's about very place-based solutions. So what works in our community, piloting things, not waiting for things to sort of be broader opportunities, but really just giving it a go locally and making sure that everything that we do has broad access and affordability so that we can really unlock participation in our community. Next slide. So Hepburn ZNet operates under a collaborative governance model. So the methodology is collective impact. And so it's a group of 13 people that are working towards the progress of the goals of zero net emissions. So we have council on there, the community, and as I mentioned before, different kind of key sector representatives. And council, luckily, we have operating as the backbone of the roundtable. So they, I guess, get us all together and make sure that the meetings happen, and make sure that we're supported with some of the administration and can really focus on the implementation plan. Next slide. This gives you a bit of a sense of our emissions profile locally. It's probably a common one for regional areas, particularly in Victoria, whereby the biggest sector for us is farming, is agriculture. Stationary energy comes second, and then we have transport. We also have a very large carbon sink in the Hepburn Shire because of the Wombat Forest. So that's the land sector, which you can see as a minus 11%. So that's recently been reclassified as a national park, and those pockets of forest are particularly important for us in our area. Next slide. This will give you a bit of a sense of our implementation plan. And as I said, it was harvested from the community. So we had 90 community ideas that were put forward for the implementation plan, as well as, I guess, broader programs that we knew would be strategic, or projects that might not have their time yet, but would be coming up as the technology matures in the next couple of years. And we broke down the 3 phases into a first phase of I guess it was expanding what was already in action. And that takes us through to 2021 and really focusing on energy efficiency and renewables. 2022 to 2024 is a big focus on mid-scale renewables and storage. And 2025 to 2029 is EVs, agriculture, forestry. But what's actually happened is that we've brought forward a whole lot of stuff early. So because the opportunity's been there. So things like EV charging infrastructure, electric vehicles, we've got an agroforestry project happening locally, a community battery program. So a lot of these things that we had scheduled to happen post 2025, we've been able to sort of harness those opportunities early. And I think it's for us, what we've seen is that having a strategy for us allows us to act strategically, and it acts as an amplifier for us to secure opportunities locally. Thanks. These are some of the projects and programs that we have going locally in the Shire. So bulk buys. We've got a heat pump bulk buy, EV bulk buy, solar and battery bulk buys. We've recently released a guide on how our biggest and most important sector, which is agriculture, how farms can reach zero net emissions in the Shire, and it's very, very localised and very specific to them. We do free energy audits and retrofit support programs. We've got a community battery program that we've just gotten up, and we collaborate a lot for grants and for projects. So a lot of these projects might either be led by Hepburn Wind or led by council or led by one of the other sustainability groups, or some of them are led by external providers, and we're all collaborating as partners on them. There's a picture there of a bunch of people, me included, standing in front of the Hepburn Rec Reserve, and that's a good example whereby 4 local funders all contributed to ensure that the Hepburn Rec Reserve, which is one of our places of last resorts in bushfire times, was fit for purpose for that purpose. So they, having solar, having a battery, because in March 2019, when there was a fire in Hepburn Springs, the Hepburn Rec Reserve was not fit for purpose at all, and people would not go there because it was one of the first places where the power went out. So together, we can, as a small shire, we don't have lots of money and lots of opportunities, but we cobble together our opportunities and make the most of them. The picture on the bottom right is of our ZNet website, which is a go-to place for our whole community, depending on if they're wanting to know what they can do at work or at home, or even for tourism, for visitors. They can also see how they can reduce emissions. Next slide. I think that's stuck for me.
You okay, Sharon? You're back?
Yeah, yeah.
Your picture's frozen, so maybe just try turning that off, and we can still talk to the slides.
Oh, cool. Yep. Okay. The slides moved. Yeah, but it was stuck at the last slide for me. Is that okay, sound wise? Great.
Yes, you're good.
So outcomes. So things are always about outcomes, and is this approach working for us? And I would say yes, absolutely. So since 2019, we've seen 4.1 million of direct funding leveraged from either community investment programs or government and philanthropic groups towards the goals of ZNet. We're now at 37% renewable across the Shire. Our solar farm will bring us to 52% when it's built hopefully next year. And importantly, this year we met our 2029 rooftop solar goal. So we're actually having to, I guess, re-evaluate where we're going and how quickly we can get there, which is fantastic. So the picture on the left is our current electricity profile. So the audit that was completed earlier this year, and it's just showing how much rooftop solar and what our genuine consumption is of renewables locally based on rooftop solar and the wind farm. Next slide. So what's coming next? We're now, I guess, looking to how we can build in adaptation to our model. The model is very mitigation focused, and I think as everyone will know, there are other things at play and other intersections at play that change your priorities, or maybe reshape your priorities when you start to consider adaptation. And we've had some very significant both bushfires and storms in the Shire over the past 12 to 18 months. So adding adaptation in it is a real priority for us. And we're also looking at how to add in circular economy into the model. We're also very focused on giving our local towns guidelines on how they can reach these goals. So very localized kind of plans. There's, as I mentioned before, there's an agroforestry project happening locally that's also looking at the drawdown opportunities in the Shire. We're looking at expanding our electric vehicle charging infrastructure to make sure that our tourism precincts and smaller villages also have access to this infrastructure, because as we bring in more electric vehicles, it's really important that our community feels secure in how they travel around. Neighbourhood batteries, and then also working with the research community. So we have worked with University of New South Wales on ZNet for the past 3 years, and currently have a new 3-year project looking at just climate transitions with a focus on what we're doing in Hepburn. I'll leave it there. Thank you so much. I'm sorry about the connectivity issues.
No, that's fine. Thanks very much, Taryn. That's really good. I've been writing questions furiously while you've been talking on that, so plenty more to go on at the end. We're going to continue with the idea of looking at community still, and looking at the relationship between local governments and communities. And in particular, Taryn mentioned about the need for Hepburn to be looking at adaptation. So we're going to shift into that sphere now, and also jump the Tasman across to New Zealand, where we have Tom Simon-Smith from Dunedin City Council, who's the council's coastal specialist. Tom works a lot on nature-based coastal hazard management and supporting communities in improving their resilience in the face of projected climate change impacts. And Tom's work tonight is really going to be talking a little bit about that journey and thinking about the elements of collaboration, how they apply to a different element of climate change rather than looking at mitigation. It's about adaptation to the future. So Tom, I'll hand over to you.
Well, thank you, David. Can you just confirm you've got those slides now? Cool. Sweet. Well, thank you. Yeah, and thank you, both you and Taryn. Those are really interesting. It's not a realm I get to hear about much, so cool to hear about some of the exciting mitigation stuff happening across the ditch. So yeah, I as David has mentioned, I'm Council's coastal specialist. I'm actually a coastal geomorphologist, so my background's in coastal sciences. But I guess as Dunedin City Council's first coastal specialist, I've found myself working in a range of different spaces, particularly around climate adaptation and community engagement. So today I'll talk to you about the Whakahekaro Te Rakiatea Rautakitai, or the St Clair St Kilda Coastal Plan, which is Dunedin City Council's first climate adaptation plan. Just to help sort of situate ourselves, I guess, because we're different part of the world. Most of you know Dunedin, southeast of New Zealand, really pretty cold down here. The coastline that I'll be talking to you about tonight is south facing, extremely what we would call wave dominated. It gets very large storm surge conditions, subject to significant storm erosion and fluctuations in beach levels and things, which influence lots of things like infrastructure damage and public access and all sorts of things. So the plan is about a range of things, but I'll sort of get into. I just wanted to, I won't sort of linger on this too long, but in terms of our management plan, we sort of split the coast into sort of 3 parts. The St Clair end of the beach down the west is our sort of very highly modified section of coastline. We have a seawall, a vertical seawall, essentially with no beach in front of it, and big challenges for that area. It's very popular place for restaurants, cafes, very well used by the public, but is not a particularly sustainable piece of infrastructure. And we're having to think about some hard decisions about how long that space might be viable and all sorts of stuff like that. In the middle of the beach, interestingly called Middle Beach, is we have a historic landfill underneath a series of playing fields. So we have a very nasty challenge in the middle of the bay here where winter storms threaten a highly contaminated landfill site on the doorstep of our city's most public and well-used beach environment. Very well used by New Zealand's native sea lion as well, and a range of other sort of wildlife species. And then down the St Kilda end, or the eastern end of the bay, is the most sort of natural or sandy looking section of shoreline. But yeah, what I'm sort of trying to get across is that there's no single one solution. The adaptation picture is complex, and the way we manage one part inherently impacts the other. The only other thing I would also mention is that north of the image in the top of this slide is South Dunedin, which is one of New Zealand's most climate at-risk areas, extremely low-lying, all sitting on reclaimed land, prone to, some areas prone to subsidence, extremely high groundwater levels, and very high sort of flood risk as well. So the way that we manage the coastline has to also fit within the context of how we manage the inland area as well. So it's a bit of a perfect storm. So the St Clair-St Kilda Coastal Plan is essentially about, working with the community to manage the effects of coastal hazards and climate change related risks. As I mentioned, we've got a couple of key sort of management challenges along the section of shoreline as well. As part of this process, we've purposefully taken a very much community-centred approach, focusing on community values and understanding what our people love about the space, rather than jumping into options and technical stuff too soon. We felt it was appropriate, and for a project of this nature, to begin working with the community on values and values-based objective and vision setting as a more, I guess, a way to provide the community with more freedom rather than be constrained by the uncertainty, risk and options that otherwise confront people when you're talking about this sort of stuff, which can be scary. The coastal plan, the intent of it is, much like a strategy, it will serve as a bit of a platform for future work, but through our process, we've also identified a range of short-term requirements that relate to things like public access and use and safety of different areas that have come up through our process of engagement, which will also be sort of actioning through this plan. So it's turned into closer to a master plan than a purely climate adaptation plan. So I've got two slides here where this one here, I'll talk to you a little bit about our collaboration with the community, and then I'll talk a little bit about our collaboration with the research sector. So in terms of our community, our process of engagement over the last 2 years, and it has been about 2.5 years, which is a fair while to develop a management plan when we have many other spaces that also need attention. That process has been focused around sort of a couple of key phases, as I mentioned, trying to unpick the community's sort of collective ambition and what we call what matters most to our community, or their values and vision for the area, but also wanting to sort of begin to socialize what possible futures and options might look like for the coast, because we want to start to contextualize those values and talk to people about trade-offs and priorities and what might be gained or lost through different interventions and options. Because as a real sort of Kiwi philosophy, but we've found that a lot of people want to engineer their way out of these issues, but in many cases, our best way of tackling these sorts of challenges is through design and land use change, and giving space back to coastal processes rather than sort of trying to be smart about the size and shape of a wall or similar sort of structure. The other sort of piece I'd touch on here is that what we wanted to do to sort of empower our community through this process is deliver an extremely diverse set of engagement methods and opportunities throughout this program. So you can see some of them down below. I can say that myself, I've spoken at over 100 different community events over this 2.5-year period, presenting on the plan generally and listening to the community about their views and values and talking about options and a range of different things. So this has been in some of your sort of traditional methods like workshops and drop-in sessions and public meetings, but also in more sort of creative experience, like we developed an arts-based experience where people would come in and essentially undertake artwork and display what they loved about the coast. So that was a tailored piece of what we called a printmaking session, where people used a printing press to develop their ambition for the coast. We also had a significant emphasis on youth engagement through a program with schools and local universities, which was great too. And then on to the research collaboration. So I won't read all these ones out, but I want to provide you some of the, I guess, research topics that have been centred around the St Clair-St Kilda Coastal Plan. All of this research has been collaboratively delivered by the University of Otago and myself and a couple of my colleagues at Dunedin City Council. So some of it relates to facilitating Maori children's participation in planning practice. So how do we reach some of these minority groups and get their voice into the work that we do? Some of it goes to more of the technical stuff around coastal modelling and dynamics, and then other stuff is around decision making and multi-criteria assessment. I was lucky enough to come from the University of Otago, so I had a lot of these connections, but we've absolutely built on these, and these are a huge sort of reason why our project is sort of done as well as it has, at least so far. So I wanted to sort of touch on some of the key learnings, I guess, before I do, so you're aware the image on the right is some of what we've heard through our process of engagement. The look that you see there is the sort of design style that we're going for in the coastal plan, which is likely to be public early in 2022. The whole plan has been built around the community art that was produced as part of the engagement process. So the plan is sort of centred around community in that respect. But some of our sort of key learnings I want to touch on, obviously working closely with the community has allowed for a greater understanding of its collective ambition. It sounds obvious, but the greater number and range of tools that you provide for a community, the better opportunity they have to provide meaningful feedback, and the better you educate and help people understand things, the more likely it is that you can use that feedback for good. I think quite often in local government context, at least in New Zealand as I've seen it, sometimes we ask the community for feedback and then don't get the feedback we thought we might want or hope for, and then find it difficult to utilise. But it's a challenging one there. We need to work with our communities to help them sort of see things through our eyes, and we need to do the same from their perspective. And then in terms of scaling the impact of the work that we've done, obviously through our process we've been able to reach quite a few people. We reached around 10,000 individuals through our process of outreach, and received sort of formal feedback from just over 2,000 individuals, many of which are engaged at various phases in our process, which we, I guess, hope will help our plan to endure in time, because myself and other council staff only be around for so long, but it's the community that sticks around. And so that's, I guess, why we've tried to sort of really integrate them into that journey. And then sort of last, the collaboration with researchers has obviously been really useful in providing that opportunity for ongoing critiquing and sharing of lessons learned through the process. So, you know, because we've had so many of these great minds around our process, we've been able to, critically reflect on the way that we're engaging, the way that we're undertaking science, the way that we're understanding options and priorities, and actually sort of reflect on it and not only learn from it, but also integrate it into future papers and lectures and similar things to sort of better the field in some respect as well. So that's sort of it from me. Like the others, I'll be sticking around to answer some questions at the end, but thank you.
That's great. Thanks very much, Tom. So moving on to our final speaker this evening is Sam Green, who's the Climate Emergency Coordinator at Yarra City Council, and again has long experience in working in local government for more than almost a decade, working alongside communities. Sam's going to be talking, I'm going to big her up here because she's going to be talking about what I think is really innovative and groundbreaking piece of community engagement. It's very different to what we've seen in sort of standard idea of community engagement. And Sam's going to be talking a little bit about that process that has been working at Yarra with a number of other councils as well. So Sam, I've set you up to fail now because I've made it sound so good, and I'm going to run the slides for you. So yeah, exactly. So while I get the slides going, you can start talking and introduce yourself.
Terrific. Thanks very much, David. And thanks for inviting me to participate. And I guess I'd just like to start with acknowledging that I'm dialing into this session tonight from Wurundjeri country and pay my respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander elders past, present and future. I don't at all mean to be rude, but I might just turn my camera off. A little bit like Tara, my internet connection is a little bit wobbly, so I will certainly obviously be here talking to you and stick around for questions, but I'll turn the camera off to make it as glitch free as possible. So there we go. So I'm pleased to be able to share a little about the Community Skills for Climate Action program with you. I know this session is about collaboration and scaling for impact, and I think this program is an example of both councils collaborating in order to scale up and amplify for impact, as well as community members and community groups doing the same. Needless to say, there's heaps I could talk to you about, and so if you have any particular questions and we don't get to them at the end, then I invite you to be in touch. But before we get to the nitty-gritty of the Community Skills program, I guess I'd just like to take a step back and talk about how this program fits with Yarra Council's overarching Take Climate Action suite of programs. So next slide, please, David. Thank you. So essentially, Take Climate Action is the umbrella under which all of our community-focused climate action programs sit. And under this umbrella, there's three categories or streams of work, and essentially it represents three broad objectives of our community-focused work. And all of the things that we do sit under one of these pillars or streams. So you'll see these up on screen, but essentially it's reducing carbon emissions. And this is about individual action and what we can do at a personal and household level. It's really all about low carbon lifestyles. The second is collectively pushing governments for climate and energy policy change. And so this is all about bringing people together to be active citizens collectively pushing and influencing for change. And the third is around building resilience to live with climate change impact. So this is all about ensuring that our community is safe, healthy and resilient. And it's about supporting our community to prepare for and cope with climate change impacts. But the program I want to talk to you about, the Community Skills for Climate Action program, it sits in the second category or stream. So in that collectively pushing for government climate and energy policy kind of action, or bringing people together to create change kind of pillar. And I guess very quickly I'll say that this is a newer area of focus for council climate programs. Traditionally, a lot of our programs have sat in that individual action space, but at Yarra we still do work, of course, in that individual action space, but we're shifting to deliver a lot of programs that focus on collective action. And we see this as enormously important, given the urgency and scale of the climate challenge. Next slide, please, David. So the Community Skills for Climate Action program has just recently wrapped up. It was a 10-session program designed and delivered by Yarra, Darabin and Moreland. And it gives me a great heart to see two of my collaborators, Christy and Nat, on the screen, smiling at me now. So yeah, lovely to see them. And it's worth noting that, these three councils came together, I guess, with purpose, or it seemed like a natural kind of, a natural relationship to form, because I think, it's worth noting that there are several synergies in climate policy across the three councils, and it's that which inspired the creation of this partnership and contributed to its success. So I think across each of the three councils, we see that each of the three councils has declared a climate emergency and is really committed to rapid action on climate change, including mobilising our communities to take action. Each of the council also recognises that the scale and complexity of the climate emergency requires that we work together across groups, organisations and sectors. And importantly, collective community action on climate is at the heart of each council's commitment to action on the climate emergency. So by building civic leadership and supporting community-led, collective and sustained climate action, as councils, we're amplifying our impact. And lastly, I think all three councils are really, are really keen and have been really keen to engage people from all walks of life and help them find the part that they can play in creating change. Next slide, please, David. So essentially this 10-session program built the capacity of 75 people, including local climate action groups, to advocate for change and develop meaningful climate action projects, as well as, that's okay. I think it's, yeah, as well as skills-based learning. The program focused on connecting individuals and developing a network of people who are reaching out, working together and supporting each other's efforts across the three council areas to build a broader and more diverse movement of people, all taking action on climate. The program essentially had three main goals. The first is to broaden the climate movement across the three councils. Secondly, we wanted to support people to work together to lead and advocate for climate action. And thirdly, we wanted to connect people to existing groups and campaigns. So the program included, so many wonderful conversations and people, but included sessions and conversations about climate justice and First Nations leadership, and really kind of delving into and exploring how do we learn from and include First Nations voices in the work we do? What does it mean? How does it shape the work that we want to do as councils, as a community and together? Building a broader and more diverse movement of people taking action. So how do we do this respectfully, inclusively and with impact? How do we really create change and take action together? How do we work as a group and build a regenerative culture? How do we build a network of people who are reaching out and working together and supporting each other? And how do we change the story? How do we take charge of the narrative and not be reactive, I guess, in the work that we do? So the program had a really strong practical component, as well as the many wonderful meaty conversations we had. 22 diverse projects have emerged from the program, and really, this demonstrates that there are many ways to take climate action. And in I think kind of a lovely way that each project involves participants from each of the municipalities. So there are not projects that are just for Yarra or just for Darabin or Moreland. It really, people have really come together across those municipal boundaries. So some of the projects, I'll just give you a quick snapshot, because like I said, there were 22. But, there's a few arts projects, and one called the Big Local Arts and Climate Expo, which is an interactive series of 4 live streams showcasing local artists creating work that engage the public in climate conversation and action. There are workshops creating connections between climate activists and artists, paving the way for future partnerships and action. There's another great project, which is essentially a media support hub, which provides media and communication support to existing and new climate groups and projects. And this is kind of like a matchmaking service of sorts, where you're matchmaking people with skills, with groups and projects with skill gaps. There's projects which work with neighbourhood houses and diverse community leaders to create a conversations program, which focuses on climate and very local impacts. And there's a project called Our Neighbourhood, which is about building climate literacy and community resilience. And this is about, bringing neighbours together and supporting them to take action. So just a very quick snapshot, but yes, so many wonderful projects. And like I said, the program has just wrapped up. So these projects are really just starting to emerge and I guess form and begin now. And it'll be so wonderful for us to see, to see where they go. Next slide, please, David. So, gosh, what did we learn and what comes next? So many answers to this question. So what comes next? So I think across each of the 3 councils, we all want to provide ongoing support for the projects which have come from the program and to the people who are in the program. We want to keep collaborating more and more and more. We've formed this wonderful connection and relationship across the 3 councils on a, I think a personal level as well as a council level. And I think what we've found is that, pooling our experience and funds has meant that the collaboration has really delivered much more than any of us or any one council could have achieved alone. And some of these things, we've been able to achieve together, this wonderfully designed and facilitated program, a broad network across 3 municipalities, so, to recruit for diversity, resource and skills sharing across councils and community. And really importantly, we've seeded a new network through Melbourne's North and Inner East. We've created a strong community of passionate advocates who will continue to reach out, bringing others to climate action and change as they as they progress through their projects and develop their networks. So for us, I think, and I think I can speak for all 3 councils and say that the collaboration has really strengthened our shared approach and intention to support community-led climate action across the 3 municipalities. And like I said, we're just now, wanting more and more. We're all bursting and bubbling with ideas and wondering what can we, what comes next. And of course, thinking about what comes next, we're also thinking about how we, where we've been and what lessons we've learned and how we evaluate that. So some of the questions we're thinking about and talking about right now are things like, did the program meet our goals? And if we were doing this all over again, what have we learned? What would you do the same? What would we do differently? And what's our vision for community-led action across the 3 municipalities? Has it changed? Is it the same? And if it's changed, what bit has changed? And then wondering too what we were well placed to support or enable. So I think as much as and we are extremely, I guess, similar in where we want to go with I guess supporting our community to take action. There are little nuances and differences as well. I think in Yarra we have a very strong arts community and an arts community very keen on taking on using art to elevate public discussion and engagement in climate. And so, I think we're all thinking about what is it that we do together and then what are we uniquely positioned to do as well. And in that, I think each council will support the other in those kind of projects as well. And then we're also thinking about, what kind of buy-in do we need internally and in our community to keep doing the work that we're doing. So yeah, lots of questions that we're kind of mulling over and talking about and thinking about. Yeah, so I think you can flick to the next slide, please, David. But essentially that brings me to the end of a very quick presentation. And I'm really, open to chatting more about it, answering any questions, filling in any gaps. I'm mindful that was a very skip over what has been, 10 weeks of lots of stuff going on. So, yeah.
Cool.
So back to you.
Thank you very much, Sam. Thank you. Thanks very much. I'm going to stop sharing now. We can go back and now sort of looking to ask questions. There were a question or two in the chat. So just checking up there. So Kathy, you had a question here asking about lessons learned. I'm going to let you ask this question, sort of explain what you're wanting to ask of the speakers or ask of all of us generally.
Well, thanks for letting me ask the first question.
Put you on the spot.
No, that's all right. I know I'm being definitely opportunistic, and thank you very much for all of your presentations. And I mean, you all have such inspiring stories, but what you all spoke about was what you'd learned from others, or what you look to in people that you're collaborating with, or cities that you're collaborating with. So I guess my question is, I'm really interested in like the specific, like what is it that you actually look for in case studies? Like what is the specificity that you're looking in case studies to make them relevant to your local context? Because with the Global Research Action Agenda that we're looking to update as a result of this Innovate for Cities conference, one of the biggest sort of gaps in knowledge or knowledge needs from cities that were identified at the last conference, it was around innovations in knowledge transfer, and that cities are looking to learn from other cities, but what are the best ways to do that? So there's a lot in that question, but interested in, I mean, you're all leading cities, but you're obviously also always looking for other examples. So in summary, it's what is it that you're really looking for when you're looking for inspiration or case studies from other cities to make sure that it works for your context?
Who wants to have a go at that one first?
I can say something, at least from our perspective over here. I think my view is, I guess, that there doesn't always need to be a great deal of specificity. I think there's, in the adaptation space, for example, Dunedin City Council is leading in some respects in terms of individual shoreline or adaptation plan, but at a district level, for example, we're behind many other councils around the country. So we have, I do a lot of work with other councils across the country in terms of sharing my sort of quite local specific experiences and our adaptation plan, and they share more of the sort of higher level strategic work they're doing at a more sort of district or regional level. So I think we're all at different points, and there are always different drivers, right? Ours was largely political in terms of why we decided to start on a particular section of coast. So I think it doesn't fully answer your question, but I think it's just recognizing that we're all at different parts of somewhat similar journeys, and just sort of recognizing that it's okay if we all do things differently as well. Well, not all, but there are different ways to get things done well.
Yeah, I might just follow on from Tom. I would really agree. I feel like the role of case studies is sometimes just to kind of spark an idea, and then it's up to you or your organisation to work out what sort of partners might be appropriate for you in order to implement something, or the kind of the terms or how you might want to go about it. So I think that's the kind of case study level. And then I think where there's often a gap is when something's quite tricky and it's more of a new model, then often you need something that's more like a how-to guide of like, how do we actually think about this thing? Who are the right people? What are the steps? What are the questions we should ask? I feel like there's like a need for depth in that space, but I think the case study role, and I'm sorry, I'm not informed about the level of detail you have in your case studies, but I would say it's more that kind of sparking of ideas and consideration, which is so important. And that's what I'm just constantly like scouring for that stuff, wherever it is. And I think any kind of level of any high level detail is really fantastic.
I'd probably add something, Kathy, just from drawing on my NAGA experience, and especially when I'm thinking one particular project where we did try to adapt something from overseas, and it didn't work. I mean, it could have worked. We basically did a feasibility study on it and looked at its suitability for the Australian context. It didn't work in terms of it didn't get taken up by councils, and that's disappointing. But on the other hand, I don't think that's necessarily a failure in the long run, because what you've done is introduce a new idea, and that might not happen straight away. I mean, for example, on another thing, we we commissioned a piece of research back in 2017 about the question about whether local governments in Australia should become electricity retailers. And that was based off the experience of a number of case studies we drew upon from Germany in particular. And there was a lot of pushback initially to that idea. It's like, well, this is ridiculous. Of course, that's not our sphere. We shouldn't be getting into this now. But now you've got a council, we've got projects being developed at the City of Melbourne, which is exploring this idea in activity, in an active way now. So sometimes the idea is good, but its time's not right. And that's okay. You just need to, give it a few years. Anyone else want to respond to that idea of case studies about what do you look for in a case study?
I think just one more small point is the lessons learned is always really important in a case study. I think that's kind of the vital part, because people who are trialing new things still make a lot of mistakes and learn a lot. So learning just some of their process and their logic is always helpful.
Yeah, and further to that, Taryn, I think there's an obligation for whoever's created a project. It doesn't necessarily have to be innovative or anything like that, but I think there's a responsibility, and this is where I think local governments do it so much better than other levels of government or even private institutions, of actually talking and being willing to actually unpack it with other stakeholders, and do that not just once, not just twice, but hundreds of times if need be, because you never know when that next group is going to be coming along and be able to replicate take what you've got and do something else with it. And I think that's really important. That's a role that we can play, especially at the local government level. And I think that's partly to do with leadership. It's being able to say it's worth spending time talking about what works, and a lot of the time what didn't work. Like there's always around, we often focus on what went really well, but we can sit down at nauseam and talk about all these projects and on the failures, and they're probably the things that are almost more important than the successes sometimes.
Cool. Thanks for that, Kathy. Other questions? I've got a few, but I'm waiting for whether Christy or Nat might have anything in particular, or anyone else who's watching. All right, I'm going to jump in with mine then. Mine in particular aimed probably at Hugh and Taryn in particular. I was wanting to know, from a collaboration perspective, how important do you think it was in your particular projects to have a lighthouse project? You know what I mean, in terms of something to aim for, a big beacon on the hill that you're going for, to drive collaboration whether it was amongst councils, in your case, Hugh with VICO, or Taryn, yours was a much more diverse community. And you've had a number of these projects where you can sort of say to people, this is where we're going to be going to. How important is it to have that thing to aim at?
Yeah, I mean, I think just the concept of being a lighthouse is what we went for, which early on, when people weren't, I guess, sure of the strategic intent of where we were going with ZNet in particular. Yeah, I think it's, it was really useful to talk about the fact that, we want our whole shire to be a lighthouse, like we're already pioneering a whole bunch of things. Let's broaden it out and make it all about the whole community, instead of just a Hepburn Wind or some innovative project over here that's happening that's makes it about the whole community. So I think that was really useful. And then, as we all kind of went through the process, then I think people could attach more onto things, particularly, we were working with the 2030 target before the IPCC report came out, which really said, action by 2032. And we'd already sort of, done our own kind of science-based target and communicated that to the community. And then I think there was a real attachment to that we're taking responsibility in a way that we should be, that all communities should be. And so I think there's a whole bunch of things that different stakeholders will adhere to. Some people really attach to the social justice lens that we apply, yeah, some people kind of attach to the very kind of place-based micro solution thing as well, because we've got a very strong relocalization movement in the Hepburn Shire. So I think it's just having different things for different people along the way. But really, yeah, one thing I did notice when all the fires were going on in particular was people feeling like people sort of letting us know that they actually felt a lot of hope that we were taking responsibility and that we had a plan and we knew what we were doing and we were taking action as a community despite the fires happening. So I think you know, that in itself is very, very powerful. Just having a plan, a strategy, you know, for how we're going to get there is helpful in those times as well.
Cool. Hugh, anything on that?
Yeah, I would say yes and no. I think sometimes, I think it comes down to a couple of things. Sometimes it may need to be that when the actual issue or the topic or the outcome you're trying to achieve, that may require it. I think, but equally important, I think, is not necessarily the topic, but the vision or the outcome that you've got in mind and being so clear with that everyone can relate to it, connect with it, and therefore jump on board. And I think that is a really important factor in sort of collaborative projects, because if you know, individuals have got a different idea on what that is, that's when you're going to encompass challenges along the way, because there's going to be a different expectation. So if everyone can be on board at the early stages, at the fundamental point of view, I think that is really, really important, regardless of if it's a lighthouse / iconic project or not. I think that if we were to collaborate on sort of lighthouse projects, all the better, because they feel like they're sort of tend to be more innovative or tend to be more inspiring and things like that. But yeah, definitely having that clear vision, I think, is as equally important.
Tom, I was going to ask, does that apply? Oh, sorry, go, Christy.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow on. Also, just saying that you know, there's so many people in our community that don't know who Hepburn and SegNet is, but they hopefully,
really,
you know, get it in. Yeah. But they would get it in through some of the projects and programs that they participate in, and then they learn about it, right? So for us, I think it's also just about not expecting everyone to be along for the journey, but just over time building it and making as many accessible programs, you know, that serve their needs available out in the community, and yeah, seeing that change gradually.
Cool. Sorry, Christy, did you have a comment or question?
Yeah, I did, David. Thanks. Just following on from your question, I was interested, Tom, that you said that your process started off focusing on people's values. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that and about how important you see that being as a way of building collaboration and engagement among diverse, you know, audiences.
Yeah. So I guess to start with, I would say is that as part of our process, we've followed the New Zealand central government has formed this guidance. So our Ministry for Environment has formed this guidance called the Coastal Hazards and Climate Change Guidance for Local Government. It was put together in 2017, and under that adaptive management framework that is sort of being pushed in New Zealand as sort of best practice, there are certain guidelines on the way that we should go about consultation with our communities when in the face of climate change. So the values assessment phase is sort of part of that, but obviously doesn't, and this links back to that case study question, there's not much guidance on what that should actually look like. So we sort of launched into it wanting to, you know, with the ultimate ambition of understanding what a variety of people care about at the coast, and obviously some people can convey that, prefer to convey that in a range of different ways, and that's why we sort of drew on a range of different sort of methods. But in terms of I guess the next bit that we tried to make sort of, well, that we're still working on now, but we wanted the community's feedback to have teeth, is how I describe it, or so to help it sort of endure. And sometimes when we put values or feedback into a plan or help it form up a plan, it can feel a little flimsy or weak. So what we wanted to do is, instead of doing that, we've done what we call a policy screening, where we've screened all of our feedback against the overarching policy that essentially directs the way in which we might manage the coast. And through that sort of coming together of this policy and this community values and feedback, we've formed up a set of key management objectives that underpin the longer term direction for the plan. So that's sort of what we've done in terms of integrating values into plan direction. If that sort of, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. I guess I was thinking about, some of the climate comms, social research, Rebecca Huntley's kind of work around engaging people with what people care about as a way of starting to build their engagement around climate. So yeah, I was just interested. I think that's a really good starting point for a wide range of people. Yeah.
Yeah, it starts things up in a lot more positive a light. Absolutely. Like Dunedin City Council has tried to develop management plan for this area in the past, and to be quite fair, it would be fair to say that it didn't go very far, would be fair. But that was a process that was largely centered around technical reporting, that was about, what are the options, and then sort of bringing that to the community and saying, what do you think? And it's really hard for the community to engage with that. Why we want to start on values is we understand the community values, and then when we do bring the information on options and possible futures back, we can sort of have that conversation within the context of their values. So we can say, hey, we know you want, a sandy accessible beach, but you've told us you want a seawall. So I can have a conversation about why those two things might not work from a technical perspective, or what option there might be that might better align with a person's sort of values or ambition for an area. So that's a really useful way to engage in that conversation.
Cool. Thanks very much, Tom. I've got a question which is around, which I'm going to aim at Sam, but actually it probably applies to a few of you, which is, how do you ensure ongoing collaboration? Sam, you were talking about you've done the 10 weeks of training, you've got your 22 projects out there. Do you kind of just like launch them off like baby ducks and that's it, they go off and grow themselves? Or do you see a role for yourself, and Christy and Nat, you might want to chip in on this one as well, in terms of ongoing support and ensuring that collaboration and growing that collaboration over time? I mean, if I look at something like what's evolved over time in Hepburn, you've got a whole range of structures where people can plug in and into various forms of collaboration. But what's your sort of thoughts about how you might take that forward?
So there's so lots of thoughts, I think, on that. So I guess to start with, we all agree that we need to provide ongoing support to varying degrees to all of the people and the projects which have come out of the program. We sat down and we had a look at all the projects, and we thought about which ones most closely aligned with what council is, each council is trying to achieve, I guess, in terms of community-led climate action, but equally what projects might need the most support from council and which ones might not. So I think that kind of matrix has helped us determine, I guess, just internally where we'll put, or where our efforts might lie. But that doesn't mean at all that anybody will be left out in the cold. No, we're not divorcing, or we're not breaking up with anybody. But it's really just where we'll place our emphasis. But there are some projects and people who will I guess find support in other areas as well. So in the Yarra case, there are some people in the program who have joined, for instance, the Yarra Climate Action Now, or whose project is, that's our local climate action group, or whose project is directly connected to that group, and they'll provide, the group will provide support to that project and those people, as well as council providing support as well. So yeah, and I think I think you probably know this too, that like relationships and building and caring for those relationships that we've established with the people in the program will be really important to keep, I guess, the collaboration with councils and between each other going as well. So yeah, so I think, all of us will spend time checking in with people and projects. We'll provide opportunities for people to come together and reconvene around their projects, and in a social way as well. The program was delivered predominantly online when we had planned it face-to-face, and people are so keen to come together in a face-to-face way. So I think, so I guess the short answer is yes, we'll provide ongoing support for the projects and the people, but it will look different in so many different circumstances for different people and different projects. I can't hear you, David.
No, it's because I'm muted, because, I'm an idiot. I've got to the stage in the webinar and I'm still muting myself and not coming off and thinking about it.
How long have we been using Zoom, eh?
No, exactly. Yeah, 18 months. I think we would learn. Okay, if there's no more questions, I'm going to put that out to anyone. Does anyone have any more further questions? Otherwise, I think we might call time for this evening. I'd like to end by thanking our speakers tonight. Thank Hugh Butcher and Tom Simon-Smith and Taryn Lane and Sam Green. Thanks very much for your contributions. It's been a good and engaging session, and getting a feel for a little bit more depth. I know some of the projects reasonably well, like Vico and so on, but it's good to actually sort of go into the other ones in a bit more depth. Thanks very much for your time. Remember, this is being recorded, so hopefully other people anywhere around the world might be able to watch this and get in contact. But thanks, everybody, and good evening.
Thanks, you, David. Good night, everyone.
Everybody.
Thanks for all your presentations.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
All right, I think we can log off. Evie, are you there? Are you there still?
You can just log off.
I think we can. Thanks, Kathy.
Well done.
Thanks very much. I'll let my daughter have her bedroom back now.